Sox on 35th is next. Doors open on the left.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the Sox on 35th podcast. We are back for episode 2. Be sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe on any of the podcasting platforms. All of your support goes a long way. Just looking at the numbers from the first episode, it seems like everybody was really supportive of everything. Got a lot of good Twitter shout-outs as well. If you want to support the website, be sure to go over to soxon35th.com. Be sure to head over there as well. We're doing a ticket giveaway. You can find it in the top right corner of the website, or you can find the article that kind of details the entire thing. We're giving away 2 tickets for opening day. They are not high up. They are on the 100 level. They are beautiful seats. All you have to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel. I believe there are a couple different ways to get entries into that, but we're hovering around 2,000 entries right now. So be sure to enter that. It ends by the end of the week. I'm Coughlin, as always. And I'm joined by Jordan Lazowski, and I'm joined by Nik Gaur. Jordan, Nick, how are we doing? How are we doing this week?
Good. As a baseball coach, we got our first game this week, so pretty excited. Excited to get the season going, and excited to talk some spring training stuff again here with you, both of you.
Yeah, I'm doing well too. I can't relate to having a team to coach. That would be pretty cool. But I did make one upgrade this last week, though. I'm now, for those watching on YouTube, I'm now wearing a White Sox related shirt for once. So I've joined the team officially, I guess.
I almost forgot to mention that. Like I saw when we first got on, you've got the old school Sox on 35th logo on there. That is a vintage piece of merch right there.
I mean, honestly, it's probably worth a few $1,000s. You can't get this anywhere anymore. So
without getting copyright infringement.
It is a beautiful looking T-shirt. It kind of reminds me of a White Sox T-shirt I had when I was a kid. That it kind of went in a similar font. I don't know if that's copyright infringement you were talking about, Jordan. But anyway,
did you just call our logo childish, or what was that there?
No, I said copyright infringement. Oh no! I wasn't going that way, Jordan. I'll have you know, I was always a sharp dressed child. Always. Like, zero doubt in my mind that I was like always the freshest 5-year-old on the freaking playground. That is, I take that as a slight, so watch your mouth. Excuse you. But anyway, moving forward
apologies.
Moving forward into more pressing matters, because Pedro Grifol happens to coach a baseball team as well, and that team happens to be the Chicago White Sox. And we have had an interesting run of spring training lately. We just had a 1-1 tie on Sunday. I do think there's a lot of positives come out of that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. We have a guy like Jake Berger who is absolutely mashing the baseball. But before we get to any of that, I think we need to have a discussion, Jordan, about our boy Dylan Cease. Just an absolutely brutal start from the last time we were on the podcast. And obviously, we talk about Pedro Grifol having a baseball team that he coaches. A lot of people on Twitter believe they coach the Chicago White Sox as well. So there have been a lot of hot takes regarding Dylan Cease, regarding is this something we have to worry about moving forward? And Jordan, I'll definitely have some opinions on this, as I'm a big Dylan Cease guy as well. But Jordan, what are your just initial thoughts on the start of Dylan Cease this past week?
I mean, 2 podcasts in. First one, we go Lucas Giolito. Are we worried about him? Second one, we go Dylan Cease. Are we worried about him? I'm feeling pretty targeted these first 2 weeks. I'm going to be honest with you. But do we really have to have this discussion? I don't know. I am of the opinion that if you're healthy after every spring training start and your velo starts to build up over the course of each of your starts, that's all I really care about the spring. Just stay healthy. Do not leave a start early for any reason other than poor performance. In Cease's case, I think he just kind of chalked it up to, I did not have my good stuff that day. And he probably went out there longer than he would have normally. But also, he's not in a place where, some guys pitch without their good stuff and make it 4, 5, 6 innings. He's not at that point in the spring yet. I'm not going to read into it. I don't think fans should read into it. I think just take Cease's own advice. If this happens 3, 4, 5 starts in a row, then let's start to worry. As of right now, let's chalk it up to a bad early spring start.
Yeah, I mean, if the fanboys were to be believed, Obviously, the sky is falling. Dylan Cease has a 37.13 ERA in the spring, 27 hits per nine. Just absolutely brutal stat line. But I'm with you. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to worry about this. I've always had the thought in spring training to get it out of the way now. Work out all your issues. Try out things that you're not used to trying out. Maybe Dylan went on the mound with an approach and it just flat out did not work. It's just kind of one of those things. Like you said, if it goes like 3-4 starts, if this kind of carries over in the regular season, maybe that's one thing. But I think there's just such a clear history of guys either struggling or looking bad in spring training that were either trying something new with their stance, trying something new with how they approach themselves in the box, just kind of covering all positions. It's nothing to worry about. The box score guys will bring up his horrendous spring training stats. Guys will go on Twitter and troll about it, but come on, can anybody listening at home, can you honestly tell me that you're worried about Dylan Cease right now? I don't buy that.
Right. I mean, he has such a quick chance to be able to put it behind him today. Like, he pitches tonight against the Athletics, this afternoon against the Athletics. Just put it behind you that quickly is how quickly this conversation can be closed and shut. My only other fun fact is he gave up more runs in that start alone than he did all of June and July. So have fun with that one. But yeah, there were only like 2 months out of the entire year last year where he gave up more than 11 earned runs in the total month. So kind of a wild game at the end of the day, but not one to read into, if you're asking me.
Yeah, no, I'm totally under the same impression. But kind of on the flip side of that, Michael Kopech with a very strong start on Sunday. I kind of touched on it in my game breakdown from the White Sox and Angels tie on Sunday. I really think Michael's a guy who kind of showed up, was kind of worried about maybe, some lingering injury issues. I think that's always the worry when it comes to Michael Kopech. But I think he proved that he is in game shape. He's kind of ready to roll. The first 2 innings were phenomenal. I don't think they could have been any better. I think the third inning is where you kind of started to see him struggle a little bit with control, but I think that's something that he's going to continue to grow on. And I think it was a very, very promising first start for Michael Kopech. His slider was rolling. His fastball was rising. His fastball had movement on it. He was attacking the corners. He was painting the corners, which is something that Michael's had struggles with in the past. He's kind of thrown quite a few hangers in the past. But if we're kind of talking about the flip side of not getting too low on Dylan Cease, I have a hard time not getting too high on Michael Kopech. I'm really bullish on number 34 heading into the season, and I think he's poised to have a really good season, and I think his slider is going to be a big reason for that.
Yeah, I mean, this entire year, or this entire podcast is all about spring training, overreactions, underreactions for the year so far. There's not much you can react to other than the 3 innings you get at a time. I think the only thing I'd add to that is he actually had really good arm side run on his fastball as well, which when Michael Kopech's at his best, he has a ton of that. And you saw at points last year when he was struggling, it looked more like a rising fastball at times, where a more typical four-seam fastball. He had more of that arm side run again. And if he's bringing that back and you can see that part of his live arm, that's another reason to be positive. I mean, throw out the results. They are what they are. When you're looking at what was actually done that day, that's another positive data, everything you said there, Duke.
Yeah, I think that last year Michael Kopech really only had a couple of starts where he really looked like himself, like, the arm side run, for example, being one indicator. There was the start against the Yankees where he took a perfect game into the 5th or 6th on Saturday Night Baseball, and there was one against the Dodgers, I think, at home, where he also got another win. It was like 5 or 6 shutout innings, something like that. And, I mean, it's hard to look too deep into the numbers because we know he was pitching through all sorts of injuries last year and then ended up getting knee surgery. But the big thing for me, the biggest indicator is in 2021, he had a 36% strikeout rate. And in 2022, it dropped to 21%. I mean, that's, obviously a gigantic drop. Part of that, of course, he was a full-time starting pitcher in 22 versus only part-time / long reliever in 21. But that's the key for me. He's never going to be a true pitch to contact guy, and while it's good to have that in your back pocket, be able to get quick outs when you can, that's just not really his skill set. So I think that in the long run this year, being able to work the slider off the fastball, maybe even develop that third pitch a little more, working the changeup or the curveball, which he doesn't throw that much, but I think it has potential at least. that'll be the key. Because if he can miss bats, then and of course if he can stay healthy, then he'll be the Michael Kopech that we've seen flashes of, and it's all about just putting it together.
There was a really good, I guess, just short little video that the Sox put together with Yasmani Grandal, Michael Kopech, and Ethan Katz, talking about that exact thing, that changeup as being an additional pitch for him. And they basically praised his entire makeup in general. And I think that was one thing that stuck out is, if you want to be a major league starter, and this is kind of what we've seen over the years, you need something out of a third pitch. You can't just not have a third pitch in your arsenal. And for Kopech, that might be the changeup, or it might be working off both the curveball and the slider. I'd be very curious to see what that changeup looks like, mostly because we listened to a video where they seem to have rave reviews for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think a lot of what we get from Michael Kopech is the arm talent's there. I think being able to work with Ethan Katz, I think he sees a guy that you can work on a changeup to get developed with him. I don't think his growth as a pitcher has ever been an issue. I think it's just how he kind of uses his pitch repertoire when he starts running into trouble. At least that's kind of what I saw last year. He would get really over focused on the fastball, and on the days where his fastball wasn't there, he would kind of stutter into where he was going to go with his next pitch, and I think that's where he ran into a lot of issues. But on the flip side of that, I think you saw a lot of starts last season where you really got a good taste of what Michael Kopech can show you throughout the course of an entire season. Nick, I know you brought up the point where there was only really a few starts where we got to see like that total effort from Michael Kopech. I think there was a stat that showed up on the NBC Sports Chicago broadcast that kind of put him really up there as far as, I believe it was the amount of starts with 6 innings pitched, 0 earned runs, and I believe it was like 6 or 7 strikeouts. I'm not 100% clear on what the stat was, but there were some real heavy hitters in there, and Dylan Cease was below him on that list. So I think you really see an opportunity for Michael Kopech to continue to grow, and I think him being able to take coaching from a guy like Ethan Katz, who has shown clear progression with a guy like Dylan Cease, is very, very promising. Outside of Michael Kopech doing very well, obviously we've talked about the highs, we've talked about the lows. I do feel like we need to talk about the World Baseball Classic, and specifically Yoan Moncada. I think he has been very impressive throughout the entirety of the World Baseball Classic so far. I think he started off a little bit slow, which can be a little bit understandable considering, the past year he's had. Yoan has kind of been off per se, but I thought he had a great game against Panama. I believe he went 3 for 5 with 4 RBIs. That is the Yoan Moncada that we kind of have been hoping to see the last few years. I don't know if it's an odd years thing, but very much a positive moving forward with Yoan Moncada.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just even going to these games, even if they get knocked out right away in the next round, just going there and playing well, building confidence can only be a good thing for him. Of course, he's not always facing, the best quality pitching, but seeing, the home run go over the fence, seeing those doubles fall, he even has a couple of defensive highlights I've seen from this tournament. I can't see it as anything but a good thing, and definitely going into what I wouldn't call it a make or break year for him, because, he's under contract for another year, and also it's not like he's always been bad, and it's really just last year. But going into what's a very important year, because I think he really wants to kind of shut up the whole, is he just inconsistent player, or is he going to go back to being the stabilizing force he was between 19 and 21? It's an important year, so starting off on a good note is going to be key for him, and I think this will be a positive for that.
And you want to talk about the highs and the lows of just spring training that we've been talking about. How about the highs and the lows Sox fans and Sox Twitter hit in a matter of 24 hours in this World Baseball Classic? Between Yoan Moncada and Luis Robert, the sky was falling Chicken Little style, and about 24 hours later, it was, that's my third baseman, that's my center fielder. Just the amount of back and forth has been a little bit wild for me. And I think a lot of it just has to do with these guys are playing and representing their home country for the first time in a very long time for both of them. And to see that sort of human element is kind of nice for me. I don't know. I think we all want results, and sure, that's fine. It's still early spring training for them too, technically. I don't know. I like seeing the human side of probably being a bit nervous and doing things you probably wouldn't do in game mid-season, because you're nervous about the fact that you have such an honor of representing your country.
Yeah, and as we've discussed before, the World Baseball Classic is a big deal to a lot of these countries. I know watching any game in Japan, anything like that, I think all you have to do is look at the crowd, and you really see how into it they are. I know there's some stories from the past of Ichiro Suzuki, just how much he would get into the World Baseball Classic every year, and how he really kind of took it as like the honor of defending your country in a way. And then you have the flip side of that, and you take a look at Great Britain's uniforms, and you kind of see there's a little bit of disparity there. But Cuba is definitely a team that looks like they are honed in. They really want to make a run at this, and Yoan Moncada and Luis Robert have been a big part of that. And I do think it is important as well to bring up with Yoan that his glove has been there as well. Even when his bat was struggling, if you want to consider it struggling early on, I just consider it maybe starting a little bit slow. His glove's been there. And I one thing, and this is kind of outside of the box score. This is outside of what you're going to see like within the game, but I do like how honed in he is every time he comes into a mound visit. He seems very much involved. He's always talking with the pitcher that's on the mound, kind of giving them, his thoughts on the situation. And I guess that's kind of the honed in type of Yoan Moncada I want to see when he returns to the White Sox. And maybe this is a good reset for these two. This is a situation where they're kind of getting back to basics, where they're getting back to like finding the love of baseball and really getting it rolling. But as far as finding the love of baseball and kind of developing a love of baseball, we need to talk about Jake Burger and just the incredible run that he's been on as far as just having power this spring training. And maybe this is me just fanboying a little bit, but I think it might have something to do with his son. I think it might have something to do with having his son at the ballpark and being able to put on a hitting display. And I think that shows. 2 home runs the other day, right in front of him. And I think I think that's just something that we have to continue to see out of Jake Burger. Whether he's the guy at first base, whether he's the guy behind Andrew Vaughn at first base, whether he's the guy at Yoan Moncada behind at third base. Obviously, he's going to have a role somewhere over there, as well as potentially DHing on some days. So it's a pretty positive sign in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. When you talk about Jake Burger and whether or not he'll make the roster, I think it comes down to a few things. One is, like what we talked about last week with Chuck, is Larry Garcia on the bench, is Gavin Cheese on the bench, etc. But even just getting back to, how he plays, I love the power. I mean, anyone who has read anything I wrote knows that I think this is an extremely power-starved team to the point where I wasn't even that excited about the Benintendi signing, even though he is a good player, just because I didn't love the fit and still don't, but that's another topic. But as for Burger, I think that, sorry, Jordan. As for Burger, I think the one thing with him is last year he had that really hot couple weeks, 2-3 weeks in the majors where he was hitting home run after home run, and really saving the team in clutch moments, honestly. But I know, again, he was injured just like a lot of guys last year, but in AAA, he only had a 735 OPS, granted 39 games. So my issue with him is that I would like to see him, kind of force the issue a little bit more. Like, I mean, you could argue he's doing that in spring training, but if he gets optioned to AAA and he has a mediocre, like 700s OPS again, then like that's good enough where you can call him up if someone gets hurt. But I would really like to see him, just go on an absolute tear in AAA like we've seen a lot of prospects do and just hit home run after home run and kind of make the White Sox give him a spot, even if it means putting Jimenez in the outfield a little bit more and making time for Burger at DH. I mean, that's a great problem to have.
I mean, in all honesty, and it's something that we'll have to talk about as we start really thinking about the roster crunch towards the end of this. I'm having a hard time leaving him off this roster. I'm going to be flat out honest. I think if you can find a super utility guy, Ben Zobrist-esque in a Romy Gonzalez, or force Larry Garcia to do that, that's how you can manage carrying him and Sheets and Zavala. I'm having a really hard time consistently just shuttling this guy back and forth. Even though it may not be the best roster fit necessarily because of Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets and Eloy Jimenez. I don't know. And it may change if he cools off over the next couple weeks. But, I mean, outside of the fact that dad strength is clearly a real thing, I'm having a really hard time keeping him off this roster, this 26 man, just simply because this sort of power is what this team has lacked at times when things have not been going well. And to have that even off the bench, I mean, it's the difference between Jake Berger and Jake Marisnik, essentially. And when you put it all together, again, we can debate this as we really start thinking about those roster decisions. But man, you talk about earning something and proving something. It's hard to do much more than he has.
Well, yeah, and like I feel the same way, and I got into a lot of arguments last year about it because there are certain points where you watch what Jake Berger has done up to this point, especially when you consider the entire story behind his injury and how he's kind of worked like to where he's at. He's done everything he's needed to do. You know, he's come to spring training this year willing to play multiple positions. You know, he's not sure. You look at Jake Berger and maybe you see a first baseman, but that's not necessarily his set position. You know what I mean? He's used to playing third base. And he's had an openness to do that. You know, he's done a little bit of everything. He showed up at the plate, and you know, I got in arguments about this last year, and this will kind of be my closing point on it. Is you know, people will complain about the errors. People will complain about maybe he's not the best fielder in the world, but you know, you look at baseball historically. You look at guys like Jeff Kent. You justified Jeff Kent being on the field and being terrible in the field because of what he did in the batter box. And Jeff Kent played on a lot of very successful baseball teams. So I really do think with a team that is just starving for power the way the Chicago White Sox is right now, I'm with you, Jordan. It's very hard for me to keep him off the roster, even if you don't necessarily love where he lines up position-wise because of what you have currently on the roster and currently guys that you have a pretty strong indication or you're going to bring onto that opening day roster. Power sells, man. It plays. It plays. If you can rake, man, it's a good problem to have, and it will cover up a lot of other issues that you have in your game. But as far as covering up issues that you may have in your game or maybe developing your game further than what you already have, we have Michael Suareo on the other line currently. He is a Sox On 35th contributor. He is a guy who is going to discuss a lot of the minor league side of things as far as spring training goes. Really excited to talk with him. He did recently did an article, Top 30 Prospects, that you can find on SoxOn35th.com. We will have that in the description below as well, so you can get a look at it. But very excited to talk to Michael. So we're going to go ahead and bring him in our discussion with Michael Suareo. All right, guys, we are now joined by Sox On 35th contributor Michael Suareo. Michael covers a lot of the minor league stuff for us over here at Sox On 35th. He is a guy who knows quite a bit about prospects, and he'll be able to give us a lot of intel here about some of the names who have flew a little bit under the radar as far as spring training goes. But on the flip side of that, Michael, as we get started, Michael, first of all, it's nice to see you. Glad to have you on the show.
Great to see you guys as well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I know I just started with saying the guys who are maybe a little bit more obscure that Sox fans are catching, but just to start, just because we like to start on a positive note, who are guys that have stood out to you so far?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think everyone's been talking about Oscar Colas and the spring training that he's had so far. I mean, he's been absolutely killing it. You've seen the power come on as of recently, but all spring training, we've seen those bat-to-ball skills he's got. He's just been really good at the plate and really earning that opening day right field job, at least in my eyes. Another guy that I want to touch on is Bryan Ramos, who I'll be honest, I was a little slower than most media outlets to get on the Bryan Ramos hype train. I know most people started ranking him a little higher early last year, and for good reason. He had an extremely hot start to the season last year. I was a little slower to get on that just because his season last year was a little bit inconsistent. You know, after that really hot start, he slowed down to be about like a 230 hitter with a 700 OPS, which is fine, but, not, super impact hitter. And then he came on really strong again late in the season. But, I mean, he's shown off his ability to hit the ball this entire spring training, hitting 375, I think, with a 950 OPS. He's got, I think he's hit 1 home run this spring training so far, and he's just been really showing his bat to ball skills. He's really been impressive at the plate, and it's no surprise that he's shot up the rankings over the past season, and I think he's going to start this season in Double-A. I believe he just actually recently got sent back down to Double-A, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how he can carry this momentum into the new season. And then on the pitching side, we got a couple of our recent bullpen acquisitions, Franklin German and Gregory Santos. Both of those guys have been absolutely lights out so far in spring training. Neither one of them have allowed a run yet. I think Franklin German's only walked 1 hitter. Santos hasn't walked anyone. They've both been able to strike guys out. They've both looked really under control on the mound. And, I don't know if they're going to crack the opening day roster, especially they're competing with Nick Gaur, who he was the Rule 5 draft pick, so he's probably got the edge over them right now just in terms of a roster spot. But those are 2 guys that I've been impressed with, and I think that they're going to make their mark on this roster at some point this season.
Michael, that's an interesting answer. I think that we definitely want to talk about some of those guys who are maybe lower on, say, a top 30 list or your top 30 list, but because you brought up Oscar Colas, I do want to follow up on him. I think he's somebody who's very exciting right now to Sox fans just because it kind of feels like the culmination of the hole in right field. Like we needed left-handed power, we needed defense, and it seems like he can provide both. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is realistic to expect out of him this year in the major leagues, whether that's from a stat basis or if you just want to talk about what you think he'll provide more generally? And then building off that, do you think he has a chance of not just being, whatever you think is realistic, but also being in maybe the Rookie of the Year conversation or hitting 30 home runs, something really optimistic, if that's at all possible?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say it's possible. I mean, he's got the talent to be in that Rookie of the Year conversation, especially if he does crack the opening day roster, which I think everyone pretty much expects him to at this point. I mean, he's just been, I can't see how they can leave him off the roster at this point. He's been so impressive. In general, I think as a hitter, he's got a lot of power. I mean, everyone knows that, and we've seen it come on recently. He can absolutely demolish the baseball. But one thing he doesn't get as much credit for is he's just a really good hitter, too. Like, he can use the entire field. He's got very good bat-to-ball skills. People, like to say that he is a little too aggressive at the plate, and I would agree with that. But it doesn't lead to an overwhelming amount of strikeouts. He's kept his strikeout rate relatively average. I think it's just above 20% last year. But he makes contact so well that he doesn't really strike out that much. And again, like I said, he is pretty aggressive at the plate, so he doesn't draw many walks. And I definitely think that's one area that he could improve on in order to reach his full potential. But where he's at right now, I mean, I think he can slot into the 6th hole in this lineup, and the Sox wouldn't have any issues with that. I think he'd be perfectly fine right there. I don't think the Sox need him to be any better than that, at least to begin the season. Maybe as the season goes on, if some injuries hit, they will need him to step up, and I think he can get on a hot streak and fill that role pretty well. But at least right now, I think that 6 or 7 spot, I think he's got no issue filling in well there. And then defensively, I mean, he's already an upgrade over anything we had last season in right field. I mean, the bar is set extremely low there. And you guys know I'm a Gavin Sheets fan, but he's not a right fielder. Not at all. But, I mean, he was able to handle center field in the minors relatively well. His home is definitely in right field, though. He's got more than enough range to handle that spot. He's got an absolute cannon of an arm, and I think he's going to provide an upgrade there day one.
Yeah, big Gavin Sheets fan, but at least you're honest about his ability to play right field. Appreciate that.
Yep. I only like his bat.
Hey, at least I respect it. I respect someone who's realistic there about his stands. I respect it.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a bit, and I'll go back to Ramos really quickly. Like you said, he got moved down to Double-A. Well, not moved down, but reassigned to Double A.
Mm-hmm.
What does a growth path look like for him this year? Is it realistic to expect him to be in Triple A? Is it realistic to say, hey, just finish this year out at Double A and we'll see where you are next year? What does a growth year look like him? What sort of challenges does he have to face to see that growth over the course of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I would, my personal opinion is I would not expect to see him get a call up to the majors at some point this year, but at the same time, who expected Lenny Sosa to get called up last year? So things could definitely happen. He's got the ability at the plate to force the issue, I think. Double A is going to be a good test for him. I think it's going to be the most advanced pitching that he's seen. I know we saw a little bit of it in Project Birmingham last year, but he's going to have a full season of that this year. And, that entire league in Double A that the Birmingham Barons are in, that's a pitcher-friendly league. It is hard to hit there. So if he can prove that he can hit and hit for power at that league, then I think, at least in my personal opinion, that's a bigger test than what we would need to see from him if he got called up to AAA. Because I think it's easier to hit in that level. The ball just carries at that field. But it is a lot harder to hit in Birmingham. So that's why I was high on Lenny Sosa last year. And if he can hit well in Birmingham, then I definitely think there's an outside shot that he can, force the issue. And he's got to jump both Yoan Moncada and Jake Berger at third base. That's the one big thing that he's got blocking him right now. But who knows? Maybe he has played some second base as well. And, we don't have a long-term answer there, and maybe they want to see him get an extended look there. I'm sure he can move to the corner outfields if he was asked. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited to see what he can do in Double A, though, and I definitely think he's got the ability to force that issue.
Yeah, I definitely agree with most of your breakdown there, Michael. Well, all of your breakdown, honestly. I think Ramos is a guy that he has a lot of potential, but he did just turn 21 actually here on Sunday. Still a pretty young guy. Which, by the way, happy birthday, Bryan Ramos. But yeah, there's a logjam at third base. It's incredibly hard to get over there. There's kind of a logjam at first, even if you wanted to do something like that. The middle of the infield would probably be his best bet. But like you said, I think I agree with you. I think it's a situation where I think patience is virtue. It really is, because he can be something, and I don't think we need him to be that this year. But kind of continuing to roll on with the prospects. We talked about some heavy hitters right there. Even bringing up Lenny Sosa, who was somebody who I think a lot of people were excited about last year. You had just recently over on SoxOn35th.com released a top 30 prospects list. I really enjoyed that read. Is there any guys on that list do you think that are maybe a little bit low right now that could potentially be kind of a big mover this year that really nobody's talking about?
Yeah, and it's hard to say no one's talking about him, but I think he's going to be, if he puts up the season that a lot of people think he can, he's going to be a massive riser, and that's Ryan Burroughs, who he put together his debut season in the Dominican Summer League last year. I had him ranked in the low 20s on my top 30 list. MLB Pipeline actually had him as high as 11. So that was a surprise to a lot of people, I think, because he's not a well-known prospect yet, but he has got the ability to really jump up those rankings. He was 18 in his first season in professional baseball. He was only a $70,000 signing bonus guy out of Panama. So he is very, very under the radar signing, but he was an absolute home run from the scouting department. He's a 6'2" shortstop. He's incredibly athletic. He's got a lot of range. He was, I think, 12 for 12 in stolen bases in the DSL last year. Hit a couple home runs, and he's got as he matures and fills out, he's got a lot of raw power in that swing. And as he grows a little more, I think he's going to add even more strength, and he's going to definitely add to that power output. He's a guy that could probably be a 2020 guy if he reaches his ceiling. There's a lot of potential with him. And he's actually also shown a pretty advanced approach at the plate, considering it was, his first season in minor league baseball. He had, I think, about a 13% walk rate, strikeout rate just below 18%. We'll see if he can keep those numbers as he gets into some higher levels, but I would expect him to make his stateside debut next year, most likely in Arizona. However, the Sox have been known to be a little more aggressive with some of these prospects that they're high on. So there is an outside shot that he could start in Low A Kannapolis so that the Sox can get a full season out of him. It wouldn't shock me. I think it's more likely that he debuts in Arizona, though. But either way, he's definitely a prospect that White Sox fans should keep an eye on because he is one that can absolutely skyrocket.
You know, I really like that that's the type of prospect that you brought up, because I don't think it gets highlighted enough with our organization how well we are at signing international players. You know, and that's something that doesn't really get talked about enough. You know, I think everybody kind of looks at our farm, doesn't look at, you know, top end first round pick talent all over the farm or anything like that. They don't really see that. But I really think we do have quite the pipeline when it comes to being able to have our international scouting department go out there and find guys. So I really like that, and I really think that's somebody to keep an eye on. And for anybody listening, we will actually have the link to Michael's article in the description. Whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, we'll try to have that in there so you can go check it out. A really great read. So I really think. I really like that. I really like that. I think that's a very important part to highlight.
Other than Burrows, two guys that I wanted to ask you quickly about that you mentioned briefly were Franklin German as well as Gregory Santos. What have you seen from them this spring? Since I know spring training is kind of the only thing we got, it's kind of our focus right now. What have you seen from them that you've kind of liked, whether or not they make the roster? But they're names that have been talked about because of the potential to add to a bullpen that's already down Liam Hendricks.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of them have been pretty damn good so far in spring training. Both of them have shown an ability to miss bats. I think first and foremost, they both have been, shown the ability to strike batters out. I mean, we haven't gotten a ton of the best look at them. And I think Franklin German's pitched 6 innings, Santos has pitched 4. So it wasn't the most extended look we could have gotten out of them. But in what we've seen so far, both of them have been able to strike batters out. They both limited walks. I don't think Santos has walked anyone yet. Neither one of them have given up a run so far in spring training. And, these are prime Ethan Katz guys too. High velocity fastball, big breaking pitch. Usually, I know he's a big fan of the fastball slider combination. I think both those guys fit the bill pretty well. I think he's already been working on that with them. And, like I said before, I do think that they're probably behind Nick Avila just because he was a Rule 5 draft pick. And I think it's just he's going to have the edge just because if he doesn't get a roster spot, he gets sent back to his original team. But I think both of these guys have really shown a lot of ability on the mound. And, as unfortunate as it is, there is a hole in this bullpen right now with Liam Hendricks out for who knows how long. All praying for him. But I think this is a great opportunity for those guys to step up and show that they belong on this bullpen. And so far, they've both been up for the challenge.
And it's nice to see a guy like Santos, who you mentioned hasn't walked anyone yet in the spring, when walks were kind of the story of him as he came over to the White Sox. So it's encouraging to see that some of those arms, like you said, these Ethan Katz projects are starting to bear some fruit in some form. It's still early, and it's only spring training, but there are positives there, as you've mentioned, and it's good to see.
Michael Suareo, guy you can find on soxon35th.com. I know he has a Twitter account as well. I'm not sure what the Twitter handle is off the top of my head. I'll let you plug that right before you go. But a lot of great stuff, a lot of minor league stuff, and we're excited to see you back here eventually, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And the Twitter is msuareo.
Got to do the shameless plug. Well, appreciate having you on, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, and that was Michael Suareo. Lot of really good info there. I guess the biggest thing I would highlight on top of all of that would have to be the Bryan Ramos points. I think he is a really polarizing prospect. I think he's somebody who did look very well in spring training. Obviously, at just sitting at 21 years old, that's a tough task to really call up right now, especially with the logjam we have at third base. But I do like the idea of him potentially getting reps at second. As Michael was talking about, I think there is an open opportunity at second base for a young prospect, regardless of who that might be. If we're playing the longer game, I could see that being a Colson Montgomery, but there are some guys who could potentially play the middle of that infield, and I think Bryan Ramos is a guy you certainly need to consider. I really liked a lot of the points that Michael brought up. I thought it was a lot of great info.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those things where with Ramos, if someone gets hurt, say next year, maybe Moncada goes in the aisle for 10 days, and at that point Jake Berger is playing first base more than third like he started to, maybe that's a good opportunity for Ramos to come up and show what he can do. I also wanted to comment on Jose Rodriguez as a potential September call-up this year, because I think that one thing about Rodriguez is that is so special beyond just his athleticism, the way he plays the game in general, is his speed. He stole 40 bases a couple years ago in his last healthy season, and that was, 120 or so games. It wasn't even, a full year, quote unquote. And I think that now there are the bigger bases in the major leagues and the pickoff rules, etc. He's one guy where he's just so fast that if they call him up in September, he doesn't even need to start necessarily to make an impact. He could just be a pinch runner and, play some defense at second or short when needed. So that's one interesting name to watch, and I like that he brought him up as a potential call-up just because there's so many things he can do if he stays healthy. So I'm looking forward to a full year out of him, hopefully.
And the point you make on Ramos is an interesting one. You look at what the Sox have been doing this spring. Jake Berger's been playing first base. I don't know who the natural backup is for Yoan Moncada. I don't think Leury Garcia is a natural backup there. Hanser Alberto is kind of not really. Romy Gonzalez probably not really. I think it almost feels like Bryan Ramos is that next sort of piece in the depth chart. It's where it might make the most sense to see him. I thought that was an interesting point. I also thought hearing about Franklin German, Nick Avila, Gregory Santos, those types of guys, in a year where you're still kind of scrambling for some pieces in your bullpen, it's very interesting to hear about, even just from small spring training appearances, little signs of growth, which are important, which are key for a team that historically, at least in the past couple of years, has not been building their bullpen from inside, rather going out and spending. It's nice to see those areas of growth. This is what teams should be doing in terms of putting together their bullpen. It's great to see. But really appreciate Michael coming on. I thought there was a great conversation and really good insight on just some of the spring training side of the minor leaguers. I know we're talking a ton about the major league side of things. It's nice to see the minor league side of things as well.
Yeah, no, Michael brought in some great insight. Overall, great interview, great insight, great podcast. But I think that's where we're going to close her out. Another great episode of the Sox on 35th podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, really anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether you watch it in video form, whatnot. If you enjoy our articles, be sure to go over to soxon35th.com. We also have a Facebook page. Facebook page is poppin', so if you ever want to get our articles from over there, that's a good place to go. Comment sections are always a breeze over there. I always love poking in and seeing everybody's opinions over there. Be sure to follow us on Twitter as well, Sox on 35th. I believe we have TikTok as well, Tox on 35th. I think that's something that is a work in progress per se, but I think it's something that a lot of people are going to enjoy the content going on over there. And also be sure to sign up for our ticket giveaway for the opening day. This is the final week that we are going to be doing that giveaway. It is as simple as going on to soxon35th.com, finding the article discussing the giveaway. I believe there's a big banner in the top right of the website that you can click on, and it'll take you directly to that page. It's as simple as subscribing to our YouTube channel, and I think that's, I think that's a tall task. I think it's pretty easy for a free podcast. Let me bring that one more time. We're free. Plus it gives you a chance to win some awesome tickets. As Jordan always likes that I bring up, it is not on Mount Jerry. It is in the 100 level. So it is certainly a good view of the entire ballpark. But anyway, we will see you next Tuesday. That is all I've got. And until next time, go White Sox.
Go White Sox.
Go Sox.